So, of course, when I pick out the hymns, when I'm designing order of service, we like them all to have something to do with the sermon of the day, particularly the preparatory hymn. And the Amazing Grace hymn serves two purposes. One is a nod of the hat toward what Nancy spoke of earlier, hearkening to our civil rights heritage and responsibilities. And the other part, I will leave it to you to figure out as it is placed in dialogue somehow with the sermon. So we'll see what that produces. Today is a good day. These are uncertain times, but this hour is a good hour. It's light, it's breath, it's good breath. And it's good precisely because we are here to recognize them as good, to praise them, and to be grateful. And the way you're sitting and thinking and listening are also good. And these are good words framed as they are by this day and this hour and this company. Now, in the midst of this goodness, there is anxiety, personal and corporate anxiety. And this is no surprise. In fact, it may be constant. We are, after all, complex. We're messy. And on a metaphysical level, somehow we are complete and incomplete at the same time. And that there is anxiety need not mar the goodness of this hour and may in fact highlight it. After all, there are reasons why we are here this morning. Admirable reasons. There are causes that account for our choosing to show up here in this place. We want to be here, so give thanks. Despite our troubled hearts, and maybe because of them, we each made a conscious decision to come and worship together. Or did you? Was it really ever a choice? Were we going to come here this morning, regardless of our experience of deciding to do so? Perhaps it was preordained or written in the stars or the book of life. Could it be that you being here this morning was a predestined result due to nigh on infinite causes and consequences dating back to the Big Bang? A series of causes and consequences which you have no say in whatsoever. I know that's not what it feels like. It feels like you chose to be here this morning. But that may not turn out to be the exact matter of the fact. And to try to explain why that may be the case, I'm going to tell you a story. Tell me if you've heard this one before. A man came face to face with the truth in the form of an apple. Curious fellow, he was fascinated by the natural scene around him and the apple tree near which he sat. And then came the fall, and everything changed. Now, to be clear, it was the apple that fell and not the man. You see, our protagonist's name is Isaac Newton. And what changed everything was his assertion that unseen but distinct, measurable, and predictable forces were causing the apple to fall to the ground. No longer did God keep the seas at bay. No longer did reality have a purpose. So be careful of apples, people. They keep the doctor away, but as Adam and Isaac Newton can attest, they have a conspicuous and dramatic potential to destroy worldviews and realign identity. For no less than that is what gravity did. At any rate, the discovery of gravity was an assault, the final and definitive assault on the preceding paradigm. And like most assaults, this one had collateral damage. Much like Galileo and Darwin, Newton did not set out to kill God. And yet there lies the Occidental deity amongst the rubble of antiquity. And next to him lay the corpse of free will. It might come as a shock that God and free will were in a relationship of such intimacy that they were both felled by the same apple. Certainly not without irony. To many here, the idea of an omnipotent, omniscient God might be synonymous with predestination and the suppression of free will. And yet, in the end, the paradigm that Newton and his kind ushered in eliminated the possibility of either. So here is the forensics. The way Newton described gravity set us on a trajectory of cause and effect, where every event has a material causes, identifiable, measurable causes, and every effect can be predicted by taking these causes into account. This view is maintained in physics, biology, and psychology. It is a notion of reality where our predictive accuracy is limited only by the amount and accuracy of the information that we possess. Given enough information, we can predict anything. The metaphor is billiard balls or a machine. And it is a powerful, effective worldview. Cause and effect took humanity to the moon. However, our personalities, our decision-making methods are reduced or perhaps elevated to a definite, if difficult to figure, mixture of DNA, biological secretions, and socialization that is purely mechanistic. This knowledge is actually inherent, however threatening it sounds. After all, we debate about whether a cause was nature versus nurture, not whether there was a cause. If you play that out, there's no room for free will. So I first started thinking about this when I was considering the Buddhist concept of pratitya samutpada. It means it's the doctrine of dependent origination, mutual creation, mutual causation. Essentially, this observes that every being is contingent on every other being. That reality arises in an infinite and interdependent web of causation. That nothing in the universe exists without everything else in the universe. And that made sense to me. I could kind of reverse engineer my present or origin to that idea. And yet I was thinking, if everything causes everything, that doesn't leave much room for free will, and I've grown up to really like the idea of free will. And so for me, this became a riddle. And then, of course, it occurred to me that, hey, this interdependent web thing sounds kind of familiar. It's right there in our principles. And to be fair, the committees at General Assembly that put our principles together didn't come up with the interdependent web out of thin air. It's attested to in several wisdom traditions, from Buddhism to the environmental movement and deep ecology, to physics, and it's throughout Western philosophy. Okay, so let's just imagine an interdependent web of existence for a second. Think of a spider web, and you are a node on the web, or maybe you're a strand between two nodes on the web. And I'm assuming that a spider web, as we think of it, probably is one-dimensional. But existence is not. So at every node in this web, imagine other strands coming out at every conceivable angle, and each of those strands connect to another web with nodes, with strands coming out at every single conceivable angle. And this tightly compacted weave, this interconnected web, is as big as existence. If I move one node over here, everything moves. If every event is mutually dependent, if it's all cause and effect, and every effect is another cause, what then of free will? Under pressure from all of that existence, logically, is there any room for it? So Newton and gravity and the billiard ball cause and effect present a significant challenge to free will. Buddhism and our own UU principles severely limit any notion of free agency, and it's beginning to feel like piling on, but contemporary science completely kicks it to the curb. Benjamin Libet conducted the touchstone experiment for this in the 1970s. He was able to determine that people were acting before they decided to act, even though they thought they were acting based on a decision that they'd made. He found that the brain had initiated movement before any conscious decision to move had been made. And so according to Libet, free will, insofar as it is conscious, is more like storytelling than decision making. It is purely after the act. And there are many such experiences out there subsequent to this one, and I'll spare you a bibliography and instead quote Malcolm Gladwell, who is a contemporary science author. He wrote Blink and The Tipping Point. He drives home the argument, specifically naming the research of someone named Daniel Wegner at Harvard. Gladwell states that if you go through all of this research that's been done in psychology recently, you end up with the position that consciousness, that conscious will is an illusion. by now, I'm hoping that I've put some serious questions into your brain about the possibility of free will, as if you could choose to believe in free will or not. It's kind of a bummer. I mean, I'm not asking to control the stars or even a starship or even a person. I just want to control myself. I want the dignity of self-control. And so now maybe inherent dignity is collateral damage also. So is free will dead? I think so. At least the way I thought about it as a younger person. And yet our will, our dignity, in keeping with our monthly theme, may yet experience a resurrection of sorts and new life. But a shift in perspective may be necessary. Sometimes you can't fix the problem from the same vantage point with the same tools with which you use to create the problem. It's hard to find your way out of a maze when you're in the maze as opposed to above the maze. And it took the example of a child for me to figure that out. So many years ago, when I was working in the kitchen at First Church in Austin, one Sunday I thought it would be fun to teach one of the little kids some really big words. There's this precocious little guy named Spencer. He was like 4 or 6 or some small number. And he was a great kid. He was a star of the community because he was just so much fun. At any rate, I wanted him to blow his teacher's mind on Monday, so I thought I would give him some giant words to use. And I attempted several. Synesthesia, I remember, was one, and this completely failed. He didn't learn any of them. Maybe I'm a bad teacher. At any rate, at the end I was a little exasperated. I said, well, Spencer, what's the biggest word that you know? And he thought about it for a moment, and then he said, the sky. All right. Thanks, Spencer, for teaching me a truly big word and for shifting my perspective in the process. So with that shifting in mind, let's go back to the interconnected web of existence and understand this. Every event in the world that has ever happened, every breath, every confession, every joy, every misspelling, every shift of sand on the ocean's floor, every leaf dying in autumn, every inching of every worm, every event ever is plugged into you. It's shaping you, and it is propelling you. Just as you propel it all, likewise. Can you feel it? Maybe. Can you feel some of it? Can you imagine it? Yeah, I think so in some way. I think you can imagine that. And that is the trick. You see, what we experience as the external world that is out there, independent of us, is actually something that we dream up, something internal. The science writer Tom Noratranders writes, "The merging of the lesson from quantum mechanics with the lesson from neurobiology attests to a very simple fact. What we perceive as being outside of us is indeed a fancy and elegant projection of what we have inside. We do make this projection as a result of interacting with something not inside. But everything we experience is inside. So the universe may be billiard balls, but the meaning of the matter and their movements, the meaning of them is ours to assign. In some way, we're projecting the events that determine our actions. So that's not necessarily free will as we've come to think of it, but it is a radical kind of agency for which I don't think we really have a word. This is the agency with which we reappropriate our inherent dignity. So we are now at the point where what we regard as decisions are in reality justifications of actions that were taken prior to our deciding to take them. So decisions are justifications of actions you've already taken. However, it may be that these justifications, these stories about ourselves, are in effect a way to shape ourselves, a way to influence, if not determine, the next set of actions we take prior to deciding to take them. Our stories condition us. Our narratives train us. You want to change your ways? Start by telling yourself different stories about why you are doing that which you'd rather not do. Change your justification. Change that story. So what stories are you telling yourself? What tales are you using to justify your actions? Why did you decide to do something? The metaphor now isn't so much billiard balls and machines, but surfing. We are conscious, we are riding longboards of consciousness on a wave of interconnectedness, on a tsunami of pratitya samutpada. This is radical agency. This is agency, but it is also relational agency. What we perceive is us. So we need the world. We need our stories. And we need each other. We need something to perceive. And look around. When you see your neighbor's faults, then you will also see your own. In fact, that is what you are seeing. And when you see your neighbor's inherent dignity, then you will have secured your own. The stories that you tell about the interaction that follows will shape your world as well as your will. Today is a good day. These are uncertain times, but this hour is a good hour. This breath is a good breath. And they are good precisely because we are here to recognize them as good, to praise them and be grateful. And the way you're sitting and thinking and listening are also good, as these are good words framed by this day, this hour, and this company. May it be so. Amen. I invite you to rise in body or spirit. Join us in singing hymn number 128, For All That Is Our Life. Now, if you'll join me in reading our mission statement as I extinguish the chalice, it is written at the bottom of your order of service. This church is a safe place to celebrate diversity, draw inspiration for our lives, foster social and environmental justice, and compassionately support each other in our spiritual service. So if you would like to increase your own personal agency and power, a fun game to play is to listen to your justifications. Consider whether or not they are satisfying, life-giving, and generative, and if not, change that justification and see where that leads you. And then you could write a report on it and submit it for consideration along with your light bulb sermon. Bless you all.